I'd say that we already have AI that can know you pretty well. Like if you use Reels or TikTok, it's pretty impressive how this system kind of get your interest after, half an hour interaction. Whether they know you deeply, it's a different question. But we can make systems that can learn who you are and what your interests are. And this is one reason also I create Sizzle, and I'll tell you why in a minute. What I think we can do with AI is a little bit like what I was describing AI has done in other industries, where it managed to understand who you are. It managed to create an experience that's a lot more compelling for you. So what I want to do is, how can you use AI to do that for learning, right? How can an AI that works with you understand how you learn, and how you can make a system that's going to make you learn in a way that you keep engaging and you are more effective at doing it.
Vector seeks to answer the question, how do we leverage technology in the classroom to improve outcomes in science and math? We speak with educators and experts to find out what are the most engaging issues in science, math, and also artificial intelligence. We ask and answer the question, what's new and what's next, and what is the best pathway for our students to learn? Jerome, thank you for joining us for our first edition of Vector, our new math, science, and technology podcast. You are our first guest. So
Thanks for
thank you
having
so
me.
much. Thank you so much. And I've been looking forward to this so much because AI, of course, is in all of our algorithm in more ways than it's ever been. So if you're a layperson and you're just kind of going about your life, you've seen more of this about AI than ever before. What I found was really interesting about you was I found your TED Talk from like 9 years ago. I was watching it and it hit me. This is 9 years old. And in that TED Talk, you said, well, if 5 years ago, you would have said to me something about, AR or whatever. And I thought, man, 9 years ago. And then you're talking about 5 years ago. How old is AI really? Like,
AI,
like can you help me with the timeline of
I
the
think
major
AI
developments?
actually
So,
it's really was coined in post-war, post-Second World War. So you're thinking, it's like more than 70 years, of thinking there, with the like of Alan Turing, So there was this thinking of intelligent machine at the time, right? And even some of the techniques we use today were invented. Even the neural network technically was invented at that time as well. So it's been around for a while, and there has been multiple phases of, AI winters, how they are called, and AI springs, I guess. So yeah, it's been around for a while. Before I was born, I'm old, but it was
yeah.
before I was born.
Does it feel like there's some uh, rapid steps forward happening now?
Yes, I mean, it does feel. No, it's interesting you mentioned this. My TED Talk was almost 10 years ago, and I felt at the time things were accelerating. If you had asked me 5 years ago, I felt things were accelerating even more. If you had asked me, you have to ask me now, I feel like, wow, it's accelerating even more. So it feels like the field is making a lot of progress.
I feel like at some point, the years ago, Alvin Toffler had this book around. It was called Future Shock, and I think the whole premise of the book was that if change happens too fast, it will give people future shock, and it will start causing problems. So the rapid increase of AI has me wondering if we're going to come. Like, listen, I'll tell you one thing that scared me. I read, and this is as a layperson, I read this thing called Singularity, about singularity. And I don't know what it means. I don't want to pretend like I do, except for what I got out of it was that AI at some point will start thinking for itself. um, and I'm worried about that.
I'm less worried about this. I think the whole singularity thinking is a lot of how can I say it nicely? I think it's a lot of speculation. Say it not as nicely. I think it's a lot of BS. I think people make a lot of assumption. I don't think things will happen this way. And in any case, we're super far from it. I think what's interesting is that, as I mentioned, it's accelerate, but every time it accelerates, we also realize how far we are from human intelligence. Like in some way, like as much as we discover what intelligence is about, we also discover how deep and wide and far, it is. So it's kind of like gives you also a bit more humility each time.
So you're not worried.
No, I'm not worried
Yes.
about
So
that.
yeah,
I
yeah,
think there are other things you should be worried because
yeah.
it is a powerful technology that has been used actually. I mean, without necessarily the lay person knowing that for the past now,
Mhm.
10, 15 years in very, very impactful applications that people don't really know. So it's important to use that power properly, for sure.
Yeah. Um, I noticed that. So you had been at IBM. You were at Meta. You were at Benevolent AI, and now you have Sizzle. And I would love to get to Sizzle and talk about that because as a parent, I'm very interested in the Sizzle part of your career more than anything else. But what were the big learnings from each of those career stops that you had? Like,
Mhm.
what was your big learning with Watson? What was your big learning with IBM? What was your big takeaway from Meta?
Well, so first IBM, I got there by being acquired, right? It was I had created a startup actually in AI in 2000 that IBM ended up acquiring. So that was really a good time for me. I think what IBM was really interesting was they made a bet on AI as a commercial endeavor. In 2014, they created the Watson unit. It was after they had done the Jeopardy challenge. You know, and if you remember that, they went on Jeopardy on TV, beat the main champion. It was pretty good, really, a really interesting project, and that turned out really well. And then they tried to make it a commercial unit, which I think was really ahead of its time. Right? So in 2014, I had a team, and the goal of my team was to put AI as cloud services out there, which is all the rage right now. But we were starting to do that 10 years ago, and these services actually still exist today, actually, and they're finally making money. The problem with IBM is that they were not very patient. So they thought it would turn around the company immediately, and they had to be patient. They had a great vision, but they didn't have the patience for it. And I think they made it too, they overhyped it, and I think they paid the cost of that, even though they were really on target in terms of the vision. So I think that was one of my big learning there. Meta, was a different place where amazing execution compared to IBM. Really like an execution machine. Um, Sometimes, like maybe thinking more before you execute, or having more principles, or understanding the impact you have on the world is something I wish the company would do more, or have more reflection. I love my time there, but I wish all that power sometime was put for something that we knew was, a bigger positive in the life of people. And that's why I started Sizzle.
Mm. It seems to me like you have the opportunity to learn a lot with each of these stops that gets you to Sizzle. I want to talk just quickly though about infrastructure and do we have enough good infrastructure to be able to realize all of the real benefits of AI? I heard you talk a little bit about the cloud in one of your talks, and it made me wonder, like, how big is the cloud? How much of cloud do we need? If we're going to have all this information, like what infrastructure do we need? Are we any trouble in terms of like global competitiveness? I'd love to know about those things.
It is a bit of a new world from that perspective, and the challenge is that compute matters a lot. Even for my current startup, like with Sizzle, like our cost of compute are already high, even though we are a small company. So there is this new thing that compute. So now you don't need to recompute everything. This is why some other people do it. Like for example, like my ex team came up with Llama 3, the new version of the thing. So they did a lot of the computation for you. You can use the software, you can fine tune it, um, and so that you don't have to retrain the whole system from scratch. But it is a new world from that perspective, where
Hmm.
AI is very compute intensive, and you need to be very careful how much compute you're gonna need, where you put it. You can throw a lot of money at it, and then tomorrow someone will come with a new model that's better than what you train yours for, right? So
Hmm.
it's a bit of a high anxiety game right now, because there's so much things around compute. Even like, I don't know if you saw the last earnings report, right, from my prior company, from Meta, right? Meta in the past month has had a really high ride around what they've done around AI. With Llama 3 release, with really good things that are very competitive. Yet it costs a tremendous amount of money, right? Which the investors are like, whoa,
Hmm.
what does that mean, right? You're not talking about billions here; you're talking tens of billions, maybe
Hmm.
100
Hmm.
billion plus. For a company like Meta, even for them, it's major spending. So that's the new world where compute matters.
Are they making their money back? I mean, Microsoft put all this money into Copilot, into AI. Meta's putting a lot of money. It seems like everybody is, but are they making their money back yet, or is it in the
Depends on
future?
what, actually. So
Yeah.
Meta, when I was there, I mean, my team had some project that had tremendous ROI, more digits than you can even imagine. Like
Hmm. Hmm.
by optimizing, for example, ads models. And so ads models have been something that brought money both to Meta and Google in a way that's, you're talking tens of billions of dollars, right, of return of AI there.
Mm.
Uh, a major part of the revenue of these companies. In the same way that also the AI models behind recommender systems, it works, right? People use Reels today. It's a very successful product. It would not have been successful without AI. Actually, even Mark talked about it, recently in a podcast, right? So we developed new models that were much bigger. That needed a lot of compute. So from that perspective, there's investment had super high ROI. Now, some of the investments are for the future, right? So the large language models, I think this is more future capability. Also putting a language model that's open source, it's more of a bet. That I would say the ROI is not here. It's more, betting on a future that will depend on these technologies.
It's kind of hard to know from the outside whether we should be impressed or not, like with where it is. So, years ago, I can remember when text to speech was really, like it blew my mind that you could it could read the text, but the sound of the voice and everything wasn't real natural and it wasn't real great. So it was kind of like a parlor trick in a way. It was kind of very robotic and stiff. And things like TikTok now, that text to speech sounds really good. It sounds like a real human being talking. So I am impressed with that. But when it comes to things that you've worked on, like content moderation, how good is it? Like, how good is it for content moderation and the back end things that we don't know about? Are you impressed? Is it in a
Oh,
good
okay.
place? You know?
So I do think, I mean, unless you're really a Grinch, like you should be impressed. Like I think the progress in AI, even the people who are in the field have been saying it. I mean, I am still constantly impressed, right? I mean, like 18 months ago, ChatGPT came out. It was very impressive. The progress we're making in image generation, in speech generation, and it's very impressive. There's just like, I mean, if you're not impressed, like, what is it going to impress you, right? On the
Yeah.
flip side, right, it doesn't mean, this is where people, it's hard to have this balance view. You can be very impressed, but it's still very, very far from really like replacing humans in many of these tasks. It can do some things, but it's not going to do everything. And, it's still pretty far. Moderation is extremely complicated. Now, what we managed to do, is something my team did at Meta, right, is to make a major part of the moderation and the actions on a platform like Meta done by AI. And it's not catching everything. Actually, there's a little bit like misreporting on this to how it works. Like there's numbers, people say it's like 90%. 90% of the actions on Meta are done by AI. It doesn't mean it catches 90% of things like hate speech. But what it does, which we've seen in the numbers, it catches enough that it's very hard for people. It's kind of tedious for anybody that tries to add that kind of content. They keep getting brought down, and so it really diminishes the amount of bad content on the platform because it adds friction to it. So it's not perfect by any measure. It makes a lot of mistakes, but I think in the overall it worked pretty well. It kind of keeps the content contained, so it doesn't that content doesn't go viral, doesn't go out there. It gets much less exposure. It's a lot of friction for people to do this, so I do think it has been, a success there. Whether it's impressive, like it makes a lot of mistakes. So as like, when I'm in there, for me, like I wish it was better, and it could do more, but it serves the purpose.
You're impressed by it until it makes a mistake. And then when
Yes,
it makes a mistake, then you're like, oh my God, this is not
yes.
as good as we thought it
Exactly, and
was,
it makes it's like ChatGPT. If you have seen it, it's amazing, right? It does things and you're blown away, and then you find mistake like count the letter in the word. And it makes a mistake. You're like, wait, how dumb can you be? And this is what people have a hard time doing, which is like these systems are very good. They're very statistical, so they can make things that are very remarkable, but they don't have common sense, right? They're not really humans, so they're gonna like things. They're gonna make mistakes that immediately they're not humans, and they're very far from it because no humans will make mistakes like that. Yeah.
How far are we, though, away from AI that gets to know me and can speak with my voice and can reason the way that I reason and can write the way that I write because it's learned me specifically?
Okay, so I mean, your first question, like, how far are we from AI that can know you? First, actually, I'd say that we already have AI that can know you pretty well. Like, if you use Reels or TikTok, it's pretty impressive how this system kind of get your interest after half an hour interaction. Whether they know you deeply, it's a different question. But we can make systems that can learn, who you are and what your interests are. And this is one reason also I create Sizzle, and I'll tell you why in a minute. So there is a feedback loop that works. Now with Gen AI, also we can create systems that have your lightness, your voice, your tone. How good they are. I think way better than 5 years ago, way better than 10 years ago. They're pretty much, they can fool you. I think you can create system that can fool you. If you use character AI, it's kind of interesting. You can talk to Elon, on character AI. It's not bad. You kind of know it's not a human, but it's not bad. So it's a lot of progress there, for sure. So we can create AI that learns from you for sure, and pretty well. Not perfect, not to replace you. I think at some point you get tired of it, like I think I think if you die tomorrow and you create an AI out of you, your partner or your wife will get tired of it after a few hours, like it's not gonna be something you should keep for like 20 years, like and keep talking to you. That doesn't exist today.
Is that because it'll run out of information about
Yeah,
you?
it will run
Yeah.
out. It's very surface form. I
Yeah.
think it will.
Yeah.
It sounds like you. It has some things, but it won't be like as deep as you. It won't have like the whole depth of your intellect, of your experiences. We can't even download that from your brain, right? So
So, in one way, uh, it won't be able to age, like to predict what you would have done if you're
no,
40 and you
no,
die. It won't be able to predict of what you would have grown to be at
no,
45 or
no.
yeah. Um,
Yeah, also, one thing people don't understand, AI is very good at making the future look like the past, right? It's learning from data. It's not a good system at understanding what's going to be emerging. I think there's a lot of question around emerging abilities in AI. It's always overblown. AI has very little emerging abilities. Right? It tends to kind of like rehash the past and the things it learns from, not come up with something new or an evolution of you. Like it's not gonna have the great ideas you would have had in 10 years.
it's
Like
not predictive in some way then.
it's predictive if the future is like the past. If the future is novel, which
Yeah.
is a very limit, right?
Yeah.
It understands the patterns behind it, but most of the AI we have today is not made to do, this kind of like, a future, predict a future that's different, right? That emerge or
Yeah, there was a school district in Texas, and this is the question around the predictive thing, where the school district was turning over all the student information to the police department, and they were able to predict who was going to commit a crime, like some future, like whatever that movie was years ago, Minority Report,
yeah.
and they were literally using it for identifying who they thought were going to become a problem, can
And that
become
is that
criminals.
is
So
that is an awful use of AI, and it has a lot of problem because basically you're gonna have self-fulfilling prophecies when you do this. So I think using AI in law enforcement or any kind of like process like this many cases have been shown how because you start finding the criminals where you look
hmm
and
hmm
it's lots of problems. It's something you should not do very, very carefully. It should be highly regulated. That is usually not a good idea.
So we should be careful about surveillance capitalism and policing and all that using AI in ways
Yes,
that would be hurtful.
yes, there is ways to use it in ways that are good, but there's so many ways to use it in the wrong way. The European Union has done a pretty good job at trying to really like regulate the places where this usage is very problematic, right? I think there are places you just don't want the AI to run on its own. It has a lot of bad feedback loop that can create very terrible kind of thing. Like imagine, right? You can think it's very simple, right? Imagine you have an enforcement problem and you try to get AI to tell you where to do this, right? So you send it in one place. Obviously, you're going to find when you send people, you're going to find more criminals there, and then the AI is going to say, "Oh, I'm finding more people there, so I'm going to send more criminals there." Right? They could be.
Yeah.
Some obviously I'm naive in the way I said, but there are, and then we've shown that there are this bad feedback loop, right? Which is that the AI can convince you that it's the problem is there, and then it reinforces the thinking that it's there, and so it's very difficult to create systems that don't have this feedback loops. Yeah.
So, and in that way, it doesn't have nuance, human nuance. It doesn't have human, like you've said a couple times today. We haven't gotten to the part yet where this is going to replace humans. Now, imagine some of that's common sense, some
Yeah.
nuance. So the thing that I really care the most about when it comes to technology is I'm very focused on how human beings learn and how we can make the country smarter and how we can do a better job and take some of the weight off of schools and how we can make learning lifelong. This is what keeps me up at night. I really feel like ignorance will kill a country. So we have to put a lot of money into education. We have to put a lot of money into right now. I'll give you an example. So, because of COVID, we have lots of kids, lots of young people who are they lost some learning during that time, and we
Mhm,
have a massive remediation project on our
mhm.
hands. We have kids that right now, 10 years from now, when they're 25, 26, however age they turn out to be, it's going to be kind of a national problem, not like isolated. What do you think are the applications to help us accelerate teaching and learning with AI and technology?
So, I share the same concern you have, and this is why I started Sizzle. So, like our mission at Sizzle is to make learning amazing for everyone using AI. And so I don't claim that we can solve the whole system. I think it's very complicated. Schools are complicated. They obviously have a lot of good benefits. What I think we can do with AI is a little bit like what I was describing AI has done in other industries, where it managed to understand who you are. It managed to create an experience that's a lot more compelling for you. So what I want to do is how can you use AI to do that for learning, right? How can an AI that works with you understand how you learn and how you can make a system that's going to make you learn in a way that you keep engaging and you are more effective at doing it. So that's my vision, and that's the mission I'm on right now with Sizzle is to create an AI that with which students or lifelong learners or people for their personal interest will learn better, faster, more efficiently, in a more fun way than anywhere before. It's a big vision, and we're starting to deliver on it little by little.
For people listening, I went in and looked at Sizzle, and it's great. And I actually, at my age, I'm trying to go back and learn math. I'm trying to
Hmm.
fill in some gaps that I missed with math, and it's not easy. I just want to be
No.
very clear. It's not easy, and you do need kind of some after hours help. Like you can't keep calling the same people that are really good at math. So it's great to have a tutor. Um, Back up just a little bit with Sizzle. How did you define the problem statement that Sizzle was going to solve?
Well, that's a difficult, question because initially, I mean, Sizzle was created around that vision that I mentioned, which is how do we learn better, and how do we create AI system that help us optimize the learning mechanism, staying more engaged, uh, committing to it. The prime of learning today is it has a major engagement problem. You know, people put courses. I mean, that you're anywhere in the world today, you mentioned like access and making sure people have the same access to the same educational opportunity. In some way, today we have, right? Like, but you are anywhere in the US or in Kenya or Philippines, you can actually have access to Stanford courses and MIT courses, but it's not enough. It doesn't work actually. Like putting putting a lecturer from a regular class online is not going to help someone from a unfavored community learn like advanced math. It's not going to work like this. So, and the problem is in his learning, right? We've kind of like always followed the same paradigm. And the question I'm asking, I am not an educator, is like, can we learn to do that better, right? What's the optimal way to learn calculus? What's the optimal way for you, right? Coming back after 20 years, of not having done math to pick it up. I bet you it's different than a 15-year-old, right? So, can we create a system that's going to adapt to you and give you the most optimal way to do what you want? So with AI that can personalize, a teacher cannot do that because you would have to have a one-on-one tutor for you, and even someone that really deeply understands you can help with that. That's where we are. That's the main problem we're trying to solve. Now, where we started is that we try to do right now. We have two things in the app. One is I have a problem, I'm stuck. Get me unstuck. I can take a picture of it. It shows me step by step. It answers my question. And the second is I want to learn X. Let me practice it. Let me review my knowledge there. Like so we can. And you can put a subject X, and it feels like a little Duolingo experience where you can solve some exercise, test your knowledge. Obviously, it's just a little step in that way. Where we want to go in the future is you tell it Sizzle what you want to learn, and it creates this optimal learning experience, right? It knows where you are, it gives you content that's interesting and fun, it gets you to practice it, and it gets you to your learning goal as quickly as possible. But we have to start somewhere, so that's what we've done so far.
And it's not just giving you the answer. So it really is walking you through things so that it's teaching you over
That's
time.
right.
Yeah.
When we try to give you, when we try to solve it, we try to walk you. It's called a worked example, right? We walk you through the steps. We even kind of incentivize you to try to figure out how to solve each step and answer it or pick a solution. And then when you're done with the problem, we also tell you like, hey, do you want to practice the concepts? So we have this little feed there now where you can practice the concepts that are underlying to what you're trying to learn. You know.
Do you have some early learnings that you're getting just in operating, just operating Sizzle? Are some things standing out as early learnings?
Do we have early learnings? Yes, I mean, I would say it's hard to, like nudge people to really. I mean, I would say the only thing is like I think the students are very down to business. They're very smart, but they're very down to business, right? So, attracting their time and attention is a high bar, And so we're trying to get them, nudge them to do other things with the app to learn. It's not that easy, Like so, I think this is what we're learning the most.
Yeah, I can't remember who the researcher was. I met a researcher or heard him speak and then talked to him about nudge as the information. I mean, the research around nudging and with parents. If you could just nudge parents on very specific things, it actually had an impact on student
Hmm.
achievement. It had so the ability that like my iWatch or my phone or something prompts me to do a thing. That makes me think of what you used the word earlier, friction. So we do have courseware that's free. We are a knowledge rich society. We can at midnight take a MIT course on something for free. We have Udemy or Udemy. Is that what it's called?
Udemy, yeah, yeah,
Udemy.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Courseware, Skillshare.
Yeah.
But the idea that you remove the friction between me and that. Like searching through the courseware, open courseware, I tried to become educated that way. There was so much friction
Yeah.
involved that it just wasn't easy.
Yes.
Someone hasn't gamified the experience for me yet.
So that's what we want to do. But I will tell you that I think sometimes when people think of nudge, it gives a false impression that it's a small, easy thing to do.
Mhm,
I think
mhm,
maybe my learning, if you ask me again that question, is like finding these nudges is really hard. Like,
mhm.
I can't really nudge you. Most students, like if you do the wrong nudge, they would just ignore it, like, and so finding these nudges and how you get to get people to do things, I think is a lot harder than people think, like, and
What would be
nudging
one that
people.
doesn't work? Like, what would be a nudge that you have found that is just not
Well,
successful?
right now, for example, we are trying to. I'll give you an example. So in the app right now, when you go, we give you the steps, right? And for each step, um, we're trying to get you to not reveal the answer right away, but try to answer it yourself. We even give you some
Mhm.
choices, so you don't have to type anything, but you can type it too. And when you don't, we kind of like put some like you're not getting any points. If you reveal, you don't get any points. Students just ignore it.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
it didn't budge anything. We're like, well, they're gonna spend more time on the app. They're gonna like want to get the points now. Right now, they're like, get me out of here. Like so. Finding the right nudges is non-trivial. Like
They're
yes, this
not.
is they are. I mean, some apps like Duolingo have done a really good job at finding this thing, but we're new to this, in my team, and finding the right ones, not non-trivial. But you need to keep going at it and to keep trying.
Do you see what the applications for Sizzle is with schools, school districts, educators, teachers? Is there an application for them of the product for them?
So right now, I mean, we are going direct to consumer just to remove again like some friction. I mean, I think we feel like it's easier to innovate when you go direct to the student. But on the same side, we want to be on the good side of the school districts and the teachers. Like we'd like to be the app that they recommend because they feel good about us, rather than an app that's trying to just give the answer or get you like out of your homework quickly, right? So we talk a lot to educator. My team actually was at school in schools, on Monday and Tuesday, like doing some research. I think the teachers really like us. It's kind of like getting adoption from this is high friction. So I'd love to do that. I'm not going to try to sell to them because I think that would be even higher friction. I think what we could do is we could report back on the students, right? So there could be an application. I could say where the teachers give their homework through Sizzle, for example, and then we tell them back where the students have struggled through it, right, and what they did easily. So that is some of the kind of things we can do now. So maybe we'll do that at some point. Like we'd love to be an assistant to the teacher. Help them do their job every day. Also help them like maybe grade or figure out the student does the homework without them having to do this and worry about the more important things they can do face to face. In the school. But we're not quite there. Yeah.
Yeah. So, as the dad of multiple kids, I've had multiple different experiences with them and their studies. From one that just is straight A's all the time and doesn't need much prompting, to another one who is not really engaged and doesn't really love, the love it at all. And then here we are as a parent. They bring home stuff sometimes, math specifically,
Hmm.
and there's comes this time in your parent life, maybe not you, Jerome, but maybe for some of the rest of us, like, where you look down and they say, help me with this problem. And you go, oh, yeah, now we're at that
Yeah.
point where I've got nothing for you. Um, what the school has offered us is a little bit of after school tutoring, and if that doesn't work, they start sending you to for profit tutoring. Like they tell you that's your next step, that's your next step, like this is all we got for you. Do you think in some ways like the Sizzle and AI and all of that can replace even that industry?
But I
Well,
think it can really
this
help. I
yeah.
do believe Sizzle can help there. Yes, I think if you're stuck, especially as a parent, and even if you use yourself, I think it would be a really good tool for that. I'm a bit in a similar situation. So I love math. So I have a doctorate in math. So like,
Oh
and
wow.
I have 4 kids. I have 4 kids.
Yeah,
So I usually don't have that problem. I have another problem, which is
yeah.
they don't like me tutoring them, or they don't like the way I treat them, and
Yeah.
they'd rather deal with. So right now they go to Sizzle first. I finally like now they're like, oh yeah, let me go there because then they don't have me to yell at them or tell them like, why don't you know this? Or so I think it's a lot more courteous than I am, and hopefully a better tutor than I am.
So you have a doctorate in math. That for me, that
Well,
hits home. What was your dissertation on?
oh, it was on arithmetic geometry, like which is a very abstract field. I don't know if you remember this. At some point when I was still in PhD, it was a conjecture called the Fermat conjecture, and it became a theorem at the time. It was proven by Andrew Wiles, a few years after I finished my PhD. So that was a big topic of arithmetic, like that you solve through geometric means. A very, very interesting field, but I think less than 10 people read my PhD, so it kind of turned me off a little bit. But
That's a good question for me though, for you of like what drove you down that path? How did you know that this was the thing for you? What are you curious about that drives your work? Like what's the curiosity for you that drives the work?
yeah. For me, I'll always. I mean, I see actually another thing. You have this always learning there. So for me, I'm an always learner. Actually, it's even a value of Sizzle. Actually, it's always learning as a person or also a user. So it's something I always like. I feel like if you don't progress in what you do, if you don't learn something, then might as well not do it, right? And so I'm pretty passionate about this. And also having kids, I think learning is really important for them. So I always felt like this was one of the application of AI where it could really make a difference in people's lives. And so this is why this is all. The challenge is that it's a complicated space. Like education is scares a lot of people. It scared me too before I came into this field.
Hmm.
Uh,
I try to get people to think of education as just very simply, it's just human development, and we're all developing. And so when we talk about education, it feels like it's an institution
yeah,
in itself, and it has just a whole bunch of disciplines to it that are mysterious. But if you think about it in terms of just human development, it becomes less mysterious and just more about all of us need to grow, and year by year we are all doing it no matter what. But
yeah, I
how?
agree.
What's going to facilitate it for us? Um, uh, so I mentioned that I have one son who the engagement factor is really just not there, and it's not really important uh, um, for him actually, and he could do the work. It's just an engagement thing. It's not,
Yeah, an engagement
he
problem.
could,
It's a huge
yeah, yeah.
problem in
So,
learning.
you have any thoughts about that? Like, especially with technology, how maybe nudge isn't the way, but other ways that we can get students more sticky
Yeah,
to the
that's
lesson.
exactly.
So,
If you'd see my pitch deck when I raised the fund for Sizzle, it's exactly about trying to solve that problem, which we haven't solved yet. Okay, but it's really about how do you optimize what you show your son, right, so that they stay engaged. What is the next best thing I can show them? And and we are creating system. When you watch Reels or TikTok, the system answers a question, which is I'm going to show you something that's going to keep you going, and it does a really good job at it. Whether that's good or bad, that's a separate question. But if we could do that for learning, then I think it would be good, right? What is the next thing I could show your son that keep them going, yet keep them progressing, right? And maybe it means you interleave. Sometimes you make it more fun. Sometimes you make it more deep. Sometimes, but you make sure they don't drop, right? And the problem in curriculum development, right? That's from the start of humanity to, I would say, today, is that people tend to develop a single curriculum for most people, or the variation, maybe the difficulty can change. There is some adaptation, but the adaptation is very limited. It's not really going to be a game changer in how you engage. Yet, we know how to create adaptive system that really change the game in engagement. So that's what I want to bring to learning. How do you bring that game-changing technology into our engagement to the learning interaction?
yeah, the personalization seems to me like the thing that is more of a drive. Like it
That's
would
right.
connect you, it would drive you more.
Deep personalization, right? That makes it
Yeah.
like the next thing you see, the topics it is, and the difficulty, the modality is the exact same thing. A good thing for you to stay and keep learning.
hmm Um, that makes me think about China, the different version of TikTok that they have in China versus the one in the United States. So the one in the United States, if you watched 1,000 hours of United States TikTok, you might know how to dance better. You might know how to do really risky type of
Mhm.
things and challenges. If you watch 1,000 hours of Chinese TikTok, you're probably smarter about the world and about the country that you live in because of the algorithm and because of what they allow to happen there. But I don't know that you have the same addictive factor, right? Like,
Yeah, I don't know. It's not like
so
we have
so so
data, about what they do.
yeah.
Also, I would have my doubts about, one thing we figure out actually when learning, I would say with Sizzle is that, watching videos is good, but it's passive. And so
hmm
it's kind of the least effective way of learning. There's this theory, it's called ICAP, interactive,
hmm
constructive, active, passive. The best way to learn is actually to talk to someone else about what you're learning and discuss it and argue it. And the least effective way is to just consume content, like consume a lecture, watch something without doing anything. So when you have a platform like TikTok or even YouTube, they have great content, but unless you complement and supplement it, it's not going to be super effective for you to learn.
Yeah, you can get the information, but you don't know what to do with it in some ways. You don't have
Or you
anybody kind of
don't
teach you. So
retain it also.
yeah.
Like to retain it, you need to practice it.
The teachers, our teachers actually, when you're having a struggle or a problem, they propose different platforms for you. So our kids have tried very different
Yeah.
platforms. Khan being the most kind of like a ubiquitous one. But those don't all work. So when you think about the field right now with Khan and with Brilliant, I don't know if you know Brilliant, that
I know, brilliant.
platform.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then like Noom, like what Noom does. You mentioned Duolingo. What's missing from the field right now that you think we're going to make a breakthrough on?
I mean, that's what I mentioned is that how do you create this deep personalization of the learning content? I think that's a key. Even like brilliant, I mean, like all the companies you mentioned there, they all start to do some personalization, but I really think it's not comparable with what you will have on, let's say, a social media platform. And so, how do we bring this deep personalization to the learning experience? I think that's what's missing. Because if you don't do this, the the margin of what you're gonna get, like in terms of improving engagement, is gonna be very limited.
Mm. What are you predicting is going to be the future for education and technology working together in AI? Like, what's your prediction of where we go with
My
this?
prediction actually is that in 10 years there will be like a learning platform like that you go today for Amazon, or like if to buy, or you go to Google for your for your information need, you'll go to one place where it's where you're going to go for learning. And I think it will be like an open platform where you can state your goal, and it will provide like a learning companion for you to do this. I think the technology is getting there, and I think we'll be able to create, I have different version, I call it, either a Duolingo for everything, or a TikTok for learning, or but basically an experience that's dynamically created for you to achieve your learning goals. I don't think it would solve all learning problems. I think schools will still be around, teachers will still be around. It's just going to be a really nice complement. So as it's today, yeah, a lot of people do learning on their own, like especially when you code or when you have new things. So you'll be able to really do a lot of learning on your own. And I think once you have that also, I think it will embed, when you look at the competition of people and machines, right? I think having this notion that continuously you need to learn, like, and I see it, in our jobs of every day. Like if you're honest with yourself in our company today, we tend to all wing things all the time, like
Hmm.
instead
Hmm.
of kind of like learning something before doing it, we kind of like do it, don't do it very well, never learn the principle. Like, hey, could I actually like learn a thing before, right? Would that make me more effective? I think people will get into the habit of, learning more, and checking their knowledge and getting up to speed and having this always mindset of, like lifelong learning, because we'll have these tools that make it frictionless to do that.
And you don't see it as displacing schools, the need for schools or
No, I
teachers.
don't think
Yeah.
so, because I think the
Yeah.
need for learning, is huge, right? And also schools, by the way, right? They satisfy. I mean, I have 4 kids. I mean, you have, like, I don't want my kids at home, right? I want them in school.
Yeah.
I mean, school is not very effective.
Yeah.
You can do a lot faster when you have one-on-one tutoring, but it's a great social function, right? They are with their friend. They are there. I wouldn't want to replace it.
That brings up, I think, a really important question, though, because so much when we talk about personalization, that's very individualistic and that's very about me. And it's me, 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 me in a lot of ways, which is a good thing because you want, like, if you're going to learn, you want that personalized attention. Is there a social factor that we're missing, though, in terms of like sometimes peer learning? Sometimes you learn from others. And a lot of these applications and products are very individualistic, but
Yeah.
could they add a function that had peer learning involved with it?
My intuition is yes. Whether it's realized, it's a big discussion I have with people at Duolingo. I've talked a lot to people there, and I don't think, as much as Duolingo has been a big success, I don't think social learning is one of them. They've gamified a lot of the app. They haven't really, like, they have some social gamification in it, but not a lot. My suspicion is there's a lot more, learning with others. Like a classroom is also a place where you learn with others. There could be like interesting emulation, like where you try to learn together, you see if you make more progress than others. Obviously, there's a learning when you discourse with someone else as well, with potentially an AI in the middle. So one thing we want to do with Sizzle is that as you learn, you could actually start teaching others, because the best way to learn is to teach. So I think there's a lot of like, I would say, like engagement loops that you could create around social that haven't been unlocked, and I think there's proof points from other industries where you can do that, really well. I think it's an untapped potential, but I don't think it's proven. I think there is some interesting, um, proof point out there that people start seeing like more social learning. I don't think it has been proven that's something that people want to do consistently.
Yeah, it feels like in some cases, people complain about group work because
Hmm.
there's always the dynamic of someone's not carrying their load.
Yeah.
If you talk to people who've been in a college program that requires teamwork, they will often say, like, the complaint is not everybody's doing the same thing or at the same place in
Yeah, my
office.
daughter went
So,
to a middle school where a lot of the work was always teamwork.
mhm.
She did complain a lot that a lot of the teamwork was her work, like,
Yeah,
which I don't know if it was true or not, but
yeah.
it's tricky.
When you became a dad and you've progressed as a dad, what was the your personal philosophy of how you wanted them educated? How did you approach that?
I'm a bit of a I'm not a worrying dad. I'm French. Like in France, you tend to kind of like throw the kids into the pit, and see how they're a little bit. So I'm not a I'm not a. They would say I'm not very empathetic
Yeah.
dad. And I do think I'm a helpful dad. That means I challenge them, and I think they recognize that at times. But sometimes they resent it as well. So I would
Mm.
say I have a mixed record. Some dimensions are good, some dimension they will give me like a C minus or
Have you been restrictive around technology?
not so much. I mean, my I would say my kids. I look at the results. It's been like actually how I work with others or my colleagues or my employees. Like it's more like show me show me the results, and then if you do a good job, it's fine. I'm not gonna micromanage you. So I kind of like taking that approach with my kids, which I would say has mostly worked so far. I've been lucky. I don't think it may not work for everybody, and it's just like I think I got lucky on this. So I trust them, and I tell them, hey, don't break my trust, like that will work well. But if I see the result, if you see you're reasonable, I'm not gonna just like be on your back.
Mm. Last question. Where do you see Sizzle going? Like, what's the 5-year outlook that you see? Where you see it going?
I mean, really, the 5-year outlook is to be a learning companion in everybody's pocket. And we're starting with the 15 to 20 years old. We are starting with like big and stuck. Next, we want to go to like, hey, I want to be ready for a test. Next, we want to go to, hey, there's something I'm really passionate about. I want to learn from. And next, we want to get maybe their parents to be on the app as well. So we've kind of like this roadmap where we want to extend the amount of learning that you're doing on Sizzle and extend that use case while keeping it, hyper personalized. And then as we do that, keep learning, what makes people learn better and become the best place for them to do that.
Do you foresee like it being a good SAT or ACT prep buddy coach?
Ultimately, we want to be, like a bit of a universal learner. We feel a little bit ambivalent about SAT, ACT, like that. I think we need to do it. Though my vision long term is, could you replace this? I think these tests are very flawed, like because I think learning for the test is not very interesting learning. And I think what would be much more interesting is learning for a task, right? I'm trying to be this person. I'm trying to do this job or this task. What do I need to learn to get there? A test, it tends to be self, fulfilling in sense like you learn the mechanic of the test. It's not a lot of interesting learning you do. And yes, you filter for people who are very motivated, that will do it, are ready to do this kind of prep for it, and there's correlation there is when the school and universities like this, but it's not in itself. The practice for it is mind numbing, and I think it turns off a lot of people who, and I bet you, I think a lot of creatives actually, people who could be a lot more contributing to society, are turned off by all this standardized testing. I think society is worse off because of it. It kind of like creates this cookie cutter type of person, at the end, motivated people who will do their job in universities, who will maybe more successful according to some metrics, whether they're the most creative, the people who will protect us from the biggest dangers, or like, I'm much less convinced by that, like,
Assessment and testing, student assessment and testing is like one of the most controversial things in
yes.
education. Educators aren't big fans of the state tests that happen every year. The state is like not big, they're not big fans of getting rid of that because it's how they evaluate schools and teachers. Um, so we think about a platform like Sizzle and others. What's the embedded evaluation mechanism? Like, how does it evaluate and give you feedback you know, on how you're doing?
Yeah, and right now, I mean, like you know, right now we have set of little practice and exercise, and we are trying to learn from that. So we do challenge you, think of it as a set of challenge to figure out if you understand the concepts. What we want to learn, is how much does that correlate to other skill, right? We want to basically create like understand the learning state space of the world, so that at some point, if you say, "Oh, I want to be a software engineer at Meta," well, these are the things you are missing in your profile, right? Or I want to be a carpenter, like, well, these are the things you're missing, right? Or I want to learn data science. In ideal world, this is what I'd love to build, is a place where it's not about the test, it's about what you're trying to do and what you're missing. So assessment doesn't really matter. It's more like, hey, we know what your gaps are, you know the path to get there, and create a system that learns to do this, right? Obviously, we're super far from that. But the nice thing about learning is that as you use a platform like Sizzle, right, every moment you give us information about what you know or you don't. Because it's not like a TikTok, right? We challenge you every time of the way. So you are very active through the platform. You try to solve these little problems. Every time you solve, we try to predict whether you'll be able to solve it or not. So we can create a model that improves its understanding of your abilities, right? And if we can create like this little bit of a universal learning platform, we can start really understanding the correlation between these aspects and create a much deeper model. So that's the theory. That's the vision I have for Sizzle. Obviously, we are 1% done, but as it's an active platform where you give us information each time, we have a kind of like a shot at getting a deeper understanding of who you are, what you're missing, what your gaps, and how you can progress.
Is there anything I should have asked you that I didn't ask you?
No, I think as you can tell, I'm passionate about learning. I think we can make a lot of progress. I think the teachers and the people in that field, they need to not fear what's happening today. I think it's a really big opportunity. I think the field hasn't changed enough. We all know that, right? We all know that, for the kind of like society we're in, where people need to learn, need to compete against machine, we need people to learn more effectively. That's how you started, right? Your intro. My message to everybody is embrace AI, embrace the technology coming. Doesn't mean like do things that are going to break things, but really it is an opportunity to change things and really do it differently.
I actually should have brought this up earlier. Do you go to the ASU GSV summit?
Yeah, I was there last week. Yeah,
So I went once in all my time of being an education activist and an education advocate. And last year I went. This year I didn't go. It was overwhelming. The number of booths that there are, the number of products that they are blew me away. The
yeah,
number of like minute problems that people said they had a solution for. And it felt like a little bit of a weird commercial marketplace where like in LA everybody has a script, in Nashville everybody has a song, in ed tech everybody's got the next ed techie thing. With educators I know for sure it makes them cynical. So, and districts and superintendents are very cynical
yeah,
sometimes about products. And ed tech is the quickest way. When you say ed and tech together, it's the
yeah.
quickest way to make their eyes roll sometimes. What's your take on that, separating the wheat from the chaff,
Yeah, it is. I mean, you know, first, I mean, the school market and the systems, there is extremely fragmented. I mean, I was looking, my, you know, 11-year-old math teacher had given her 30 different sites to go check, as a system they could use. I mean, they're a bit of a, like overachieving school, but still, it's kind of very good. So there's huge fragmentation. For us at Sizzle, the way we're looking at this is, okay, let's go convince the students and the learners directly, and they'll make their choice. And usually, in a market like this, the challenge of B2B market is that it's not necessarily the best that wins, right? It may sometimes be the person that sells better. In consumer market, I think it's very different. So that's why we decided to go to consumer first. I do think today Duolingo is the best app for learning right now, language, right? And they've done a good job. It's not perfect by any means, right? But it's out there. So that's what gives me hope is that in the consumer market, people are more they can make choice for themselves, and usually there is a good dynamic. There's still a lot of noise there, but usually there's a consolidation that happens, and I think that's going to happen for learning, and that revolution will happen from here. Actually, I mean, Paul Graham just like posted something recently where he said, by the time people in school figure out policies, I think the direct to consumer world in learning will come up with better solutions. That's what I'm thinking will happen.
That's a huge point. I mean, I've never thought about that. I was a former school board member, and people would come to sell us stuff all the time, but they didn't have very good data on how it worked with kids, right? So we would ask them for the data. Can you give us data on how this has worked in other districts or with kids? And it was usually a no. Like, and these were big adoptions. These weren't
Yeah,
like small amounts of money. But if you have the same knowledge of people that a Facebook has or an Instagram or whatever. That's a much better position to be in, to have
Yeah, I mean,
information about
ideally
people
for
sooner.
us, we'd love to even publish papers at some point to show, right? Can we create methods that adapt to users in a way that improve engagement, right? That get improved performance. What's the school equivalent? So that's the direction we're going. And when you go direct to consumers, there's no. I mean, you can't cheat. I mean, you can't cheat your way there. If they use your app, usually they find value. If they don't find value.
Mm. I
If you're in a
appreciate
school,
this.
it's different. Like if people are forced, if your teacher forces you to use a certain system, you have to use it. Doesn't mean the system is good.
Yeah, it means this is the one that broke through.
Yeah,
And this is the one they bought.
that's what I
Um,
do that.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate this conversation. And I think it's a good one to start off the Vector series with, because I think AI and ed tech and ed technology, just in general, is becoming the thing that is going to get a lot of attention. We just know it is. We talk about teachers. Teachers are the largest workforce in the United States. Schools are like always under fire for how much kids are learning, and how they're teaching. And parents like me always need help. Our
Yes.
students need buddies, and so like a product like Sizzle is a great place for us to start. Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Thanks for the time and for the questions.